Welcome back to the shop. In this video I will be discussing maps on these modern day 4-stroke dirt bikes. I have the Travis Preston special map, and it's like the video game Castlevania, where if you know that special code, it will unleash extra lives. No, these things don't give you extra lives. I mean, they can unleash maybe a little bit of horsepower, maybe 1, 2, let's shoot high here. Let's say 3 horsepower. I don't think you can get 3 horsepower out of a map personally, unless you went from being way off to way right. But if you're starting with the base map and you're looking for 3 horsepower, it's going to be tough. But what you can do is tune in the type of power you want, where you want it to hit, and how you want it to feel. So let's dig into this a little bit. I have this old Yamaha tuner right here, GYTR tuner. This works from 2014 to I think 2018 on some of the bikes, 2017 for the 450, 2018 for the 250f. And then they went to this app that just connects your Yamaha through Wi-Fi, which is pretty cool. But then you also have other brands like Honda. I don't have one of them tuners here today. I had one years ago, but I sold it. But I have some pictures showing you how their maps look. So these maps can be very confusing. It looks like you're trying to plug in a code or whatever, but let me go ahead and give you the basics on what we're looking at here real quick. And I'm going to just use the Yamaha one on the phone as just a tutorial on what we're looking at. Alright, so what we have here is a fuel injection. This is going to be your fueling. And over here we have your ignition. This is going to be your ignition. Maps start on with all zeros. So if you check your bike and it's bone stock, you're going to see your fuel injection, your fuel is on all zeros, and your ignition on all zeros. What that means is that there has been no changes to the base map. On these bikes, you cannot change the base map. That's tuned into the ECU, and there's just no change in that. What you change is you build on top of the base map. So for the fuel injection here, if these were zeros, that means it's just running the base map. But if you took all these and gave them +1, that means it would be using +1 on top of the base map. Or if you put -1, it would be -1 less fuel on top of the base map. And same with the ignition here. If you add a 1 in any one of these cells, let's just to simplify it, you put a 1 in every one of these little cells, so all these little zeros become 1. That would be adding 1 degrees timing across the board globally. And if you put them all -1, that would take away 1 degrees timing globally. Now we're going to get into how you can do different sections here in a second, but I just wanted to give you understanding that 0 just means you're running on the base map, what the bike is stock. So we'll start with the fuel side here. On the fuel, this is your throttle right here, how much throttle you're giving it. That would be 20% for the cells, and that would be 80%, and you got 60 and 40. And this is the RPM, starts at 2,000 and works its way to 10,000 or above. So this cell right here would be 20% throttle at 2,000 RPMs. That's zero. That's cell zero. It's at a 0 right now, which means that you're running on the base map. But let's say you wanted a little more fuel at 20% throttle at around 2,000, going up to 5,000 RPMs, you would add 1 or 2 or even a 3 in there, and you get more fuel, or you can go minus. Now, for you guys that know anything about the car world, where you have fuel trims, it's the same thing. In the car world, usually a -1 fuel trim is 1% less fuel, and a +1 is 1% more fuel. Most of these tuners, I think they're like a 1 would mean 3%, and so if you had a 2 here, that would be 6%. They kind of make them quicker, faster, jump. But make sure you read the manual to your system that you're using, so you understand how much extra fuel it's adding or subtracting when you change these numbers, if you're really interested. Or you could just try it out for yourself and just start small and see what it does. And of course, full throttle at max RPMs would be all the way over here, because that would be at 80% or more throttle, and 10,000 or more RPMs would be this cell block right here. And then obviously in here is like middle throttle and mid-range RPMs. If you punched it at low RPMs, let's say you punched it just as soon as you let out the clutch, that would be at 2,000 RPMs, but you punched it, so that would be this cell right here. and or you're giving it very little throttle, but you're letting it rev really high with just a little bit of throttle. Well, that would be 20% throttle, and you're letting it rev real high, so that would be that cell block right there. So now let's go back and take a look at the ignition. It's the same thing with the ignition. You got your throttle right here, and you have your RPMs right here, and the cell blocks work the same way. So each map for these bikes will have both an ignition map and a fuel map. It says right there fuel injection, and it says right here ignition, and that would complete a map. By having both of them, that would be complete a map. Now, for you guys that have dealt with the street bike world, or power commanders and things like that, they often only have a fuel map on them. I know you can buy extensions and do ignition too, but most of the time people just buy the one for the fuel. But on these dirt bikes, we do have fuel and ignition that we can control with our maps and our software. Now, some systems give you more cells and some systems give you less cells. This one has 9 cells total. This one has 16 cells. So this is going to be a higher resolution of tuning, because you can tune in tighter spots. And this one is going to be a lower resolution tuning, because you're going to be tuning in bigger spots with each cell. But you'll still get the job done in either one of them. This one, obviously, you can probably tune in a little bit quicker because you're dealing with less cells. And this one will take a little bit longer because you're dealing with more cells. And then, of course, you got the Honda one. And as you can see, that has a lot of cells, so you're going to be fooling with that for a while if you really want to dial it in. But it's the same thing. You got your throttle over here, and they give you 8 positions of throttle, and they tell you the percentage right here for them. So that's 0. The nice thing about the Honda, it actually does allow you to dial in the idle, where the Yamaha doesn't allow you to change the idle settings. But so it gives you a 0 throttle one, where the Yamaha starts right at 20. But anyway. And then you have your RPMs over here, and you can see that each one only goes up about 1,000 RPMs. This one did 500. Actually, no, they started at 1,000, 3, 4, 5, 6, then it goes 65, 7, 75, 8, 9, 10. So they make it a little bit tighter right in the middle here to help you fine tune it. But it's the same thing. You just have more cells. So if this is basically a stop map right there, it's all zeroed out, so it's running on the base map. Let's go to a hard-hitting one right here. This is just the presetted ones that Yamaha provides for this 450. Let's see what they've done with this one. So they're adding fuel right up here at 80 and 60% throttle, even down to 40% throttle. Heck, even down here. And looks like they're just adding plus fuel in a lot of areas, but they're also adding timing too. You got a +3, +2, +1. So that map is going to be richer, but it's also going to add more timing advancement. Let's see what their smooth does. Well, this one's all negatives. They're trying to smoothen this one out, so they've taken the fuel out of it, which usually gives a slightly softer hit, but a little bit of a freer running motor. And then they're also taking out timing, which will definitely smoothen out the hit and maybe remove a horsepower, maybe 2. So let's see what they have for their linear torque. All right, so they're taking out timing. Again, they're kind of trying to smoothen out the hit, maybe a little bit less horsepower. And over here, they're adding fuel. Adding fuel is definitely going to make it look. They're doing it right on the bottom too, so they're definitely trying to give it a torquier feel down at the bottom, but at the same time remove some of the horsepower. That's what it looks like to me. Once you get familiar with these maps, you can typically just look at a map and kind of tell what it's going to do before you even test it out, but you have to become a little bit familiar with them. I'm going to give you a little bit of my experience with them, just kind of, give you my take on how to look at these maps. Anytime they're adding positives in the ignition side here, they're looking for more torque, more power. Horsepower, torque, power, all that. You got to keep in mind as you add timing that it also is harder on the motor because you're increasing the ignition advancement, and that becomes harder on the bottom end and even the piston. So keep that in mind. Typically with these Yamahas you can go up to +3 with no issues on the timing, but even then you're making power by advancing the timing, so it's going to be a little bit harder on the motor, and sometimes the motor's not going to feel, on some bikes especially the 450s. It doesn't seem to be so much the case with the 250Fs, but it can also give the bike a kind of a rougher feel to the power. The power can feel a little bit just rougher when you get it. You can feel more of a to it when you twist into the throttle, but it will make more torque and it will make more power as you add the timing. On the ignition, on the fuel over here, let's click on the fuel alone. Here we go. On the fuel, it's that's where it gets a little bit tricky, trying to figure out what is the proper fuel for the bike. In my experience, adding fuel, without having O2 sensors and a dyno and all that, just going by feel, when you start adding fuel, they will, on the very bottom end, adding fuel can sometimes increase the hit, but throughout the rest of the bike, adding fuel will make the bike feel like it can handle heavier loads better. So let's say you ride a track that's real deep, sandy, and everything like that, and it's just a lot of heavy load on the bike. Adding more fuel might make the bike feel faster through that. But then you'll notice when you get on hard pack stuff or just nice tacky stuff that's not real power robbing, then taking some fuel away and going minus on the fuel might feel faster, because when you start taking fuel away and start running leaner, they have a tendency to rush to the RPMs a little bit quicker when there's not as much of a load. But when you add fuel, then they can pull through the RPMs while there's a heavy load. So there's a balancing act with this. You want it lean enough where the bike is still zippy and revs through its RPMs quick, kind of like a two-stroke, but you want enough fuel that it can handle the heavy load and pull through that heavy load when you hit the heavy load spots on the track. So that's where the fuel comes in. Obviously, exhaust plays a huge role, and motor mods can play a huge role with that too, with how you have to change your feel. Most people believe that once you put an aftermarket exhaust on the bike, you have to go in and dump more fuel in, because now you're getting more exhaust out, which means you're getting more air in. But in my experience on these Japanese motocross bikes, they've already added the fuel for you stock. Typically, you can take a stock map, throw exhaust system on it, and it's going to run good, because they typically send them out a little on the rich side, knowing that most people are going to add an exhaust system to their bike. So they send them out already a little bit on the rich side. So don't be surprised if you put an exhaust system on it and you go to tune your bike and you find out that it didn't need as much gas as you thought it would to make it run the way you want it to run. It can happen. So a quick recap on that. Leaner, revs quicker. Like a two-stroke, it'll run through its revs quick. It'll make the bike feel a little erratic sometimes if it's too lean, and it won't pull as hard though in the heavy load situations like deep sand. Rich will slow down how quick the bike revs out and kind of make it feel a little more four-strokish and less two-strokish, but rich will also allow it to pull through its revs when it's under a heavy load. And it also, if you're under sustained heavy loads for a long time, it can also help keep the combustion temperatures down, which will allow the motor to run a little bit cooler under heavy load, because the fuel does help. The extra fuel does help keep things nice and cool. Now let's go to ignition timing here. Ignition timing, you can use this to control your hit, how hard you want it to hit. Let's say the bike is too jerky at low. You're coming out of a corner, you go to roll in the throttle, and it has too much of a hit on initial tip in. You can go down here to 20% throttle, and you can put this at minus, that at minus. You can put all these at minuses. So even if you're at high RPMs and you crack the throttle open, it doesn't hit so hard. It kind of rolls in. So you can put these at like -2, -3, or even -1. That'll soften the hit. But let's say down here you want more hit. You want it, when you crack that throttle, you want it to hit hard. You can go +1, +2, +3, and it will hit harder. Let's say up here at the top end, mid-range, top end, whatever spot you pick, as you get in the throttle and the RPMs start coming up, you want more power, more hit. So you go +3 or +2 or +1 on the timing. Let's say you're good with the way it is, you leave it at 0. And or let's say it's just too fast, too powerful for you up here. You can start going minuses on the timing. That will back out on the hit. It'll back out on the overall power, and it'll kind of just smoothen things out and make it a little bit easy for you. And oftentimes you don't have to go too crazy to get what you need. This is from my 2015 YZ450 that I'm still currently riding, because I actually like the bike. I've ridden. I work on bikes for a living. I ride everything out there. I'm still favoring the 2015 because of its stability and just it gives me all the power to modern day bikes, but it's still nice and stable. Anyway, for this bike, what I've done is, everyone knows that that bike from 2014 to 2017 had a lot of hit when you first cracked the throttle open in the corner. So what I did is I did -3 on the timing down here at low throttles. This is your ignition cell blocks right here. There's your throttle, and there's your RPMs. So at low, let me go ahead and click on that one. At low RPMs, let me go over here. This thing's a little wonky, but it gets it done. There you go. Tells you right there, throttle, RPM. Okay, so I have -3 at low throttle. So no matter where I'm at in the RPM range, if I'm got that thing, if I go in the corner, I'm like, in the corner, I got the clutch pulled in, I got the RPMs up, and I let the clutch out, and I start to roll in the gas. Doesn't matter if I'm at high RPMs or low RPMs. The minute I crack the throttle open, it's going to be -3. That's going to smoothen out that initial hit for me. That's what I needed to keep that front wheel in the line and in its groove, and so it wouldn't jump out, because that bike has a lot of initial hits. So that's what I did with that. However, up here on the ignition, we're going to go in the ignition block cell blocks now. You'll notice I did -1 right here. Now I do have a full FMF exhaust system on it with the power bomb, or whatever you want to call it, header, and all that mess. It does have a full exhaust on it, but I still had to go -1. Now you would think with the full exhaust you have to go +1 or +2 or +3 because you put exhaust on it. But no, actually I tried the different. I consider these 4 blocks right here for this very simple system of 9 cells my main jet. It's if you're tuning in a carburetor on a dirt bike. I consider these my main jet, and what I first did is I started with the +3 on all of them. Then I went down to +2. Then I went down to +1. Then 0, and then I went to -1, and then -2, and then -3. And I felt as I went from rich to lean, I literally felt the bike start picking up an acceleration. And I found -1 was best with that exhaust system on. Again, they do come overly rich stock, especially when you start getting deep in the throttle or the RPMs up there, because they know that that's where the exhaust system's going to come into play and lean things out. They won't so much lean out the idle and low exhaust flow situations, because the stock exhaust system can handle that. It's more at high exhaust flow situations that the aftermarket exhaust is going to flow more, going to be able to handle the high flow, so it's going to lean out the system because it's flowing more. So that's where they typically add more feel on their base map stock, anticipating that you're going to add exhaust system but not tune it in so you don't blow your motor. So because of that, I had to actually go -1 to get what I consider dialed in for this bike. So I have -1 on the feel up there, and that worked out great. Now you'll notice I kept all the other stuff 0, because really stock maps are good nowadays. You don't just, all you got to do is just tune in the areas that you feel like it needs a little bit of massaging, and you can make a really good map. I know when you see these maps online, oh, this thing is going back, there we go, and they have every cell block covered. Every cell block has a different number, like this one right here. You know, when you see that, you're like, whoa, that must be doing a lot, because but sometimes you don't need all that. A lot of times these modern day bikes, you just tune in the spots, massage the areas that you want to massage, like I just showed you on mine, and that does the trick. And you can leave the rest, you can simplify it, leave the rest at 0, and it's going to be good. And another tip on tuning these things in is definitely, tune in sections. Just don't throw a whole bunch of numbers in. Just tune in sections, like I did right here. First I actually started with that very top corner block right here, and that is at, like, let's go to that again. That is higher. They don't tell you the RPMs, but on this older system. But I was first tuning over here. That's your max RPMs and max throttle. And then I realized, well, that's really only coming into play like at the very, very end of a straight. Let me go ahead and include all 4 of these blocks, so I can be given any more than half throttle, because it's your throttle. Any more than half throttle, and any more than half of the motor's RPMs. That's what this is going to cover. So I considered that my main jet, and I just went pluses and minuses evenly in that until I figured out what I liked. And now obviously I'm at -1 with all these. I can spend more time if I wanted to, and now start focusing on just the very tip up here, or more at the very bottom, and I can bring that into a tighter, bring it into a tighter resolution if I wanted to. But that was good enough for me, and that's really all you need to do if you want to tune these things yourself. There's also another tip that my brother wanted me to add for you guys is if you're the type that doesn't want to tune in your own bike and you just want to try out people's maps, and let's say you download the Travis Preston map and you liked it at full throttle but you thought it hit too hard at the bottom end, you could just copy the 60% and 80% throttle ranges for his map and leave the rest at zeros. Or let's say you like one map, it makes you like one map's bottom end but you like another map's top end. You can merge maps is what I'm trying to say. You can take one map's bottom end and plug them numbers in, creating your own map, and you take another map's top end and plug them numbers in, and you can merge two maps to make your own custom map by taking two maps that you like but in different ranges, and you plug in just the parts of the ranges that you did like of that map, and basically you can morph two maps right in together and make your own map if that's what you want to do. And another thing nice about these tuners is they can give you, like this one has the diagnostic codes right here. The thing about the Yamaha tuner is if you go over here to your in the setup area, you can hit engine, and a lot of the stuff that I was just telling you, like decreased torque, it gives you tips on what to do. Increased torque, throttle response too slow, so they can give you some tips on things to do. That's right here built into the app. And to help you diagnose some things with this app, if you need to diagnose your bike, if you click this little thing right there, it's a little speedometer thing, and you gotta, you know, click past all this stuff, you know. Let me balance it here. You don't have to have the bike running, you just have to have it connected to the system. But watch, I'm gonna twist the throttle. Use this kind of like a scanner. You can use it like a scanner. Just see how that's full throttle, that's zero throttle. So all I'm doing is just twisting the throttle of the bike here, and that's letting me know the throttle position sensor is good. I don't have to buy the bike running, although I could if I wanted to. I can read the battery voltage, the air temperature. That's letting me know the air intake sensor that's inside the air box up here is working, at least reading 28 Celsius. So yeah, it's working. And then you have the water temperature right there. And of course, this is in Celsius. I'm sure you can change it to Fahrenheit if you wanted to. And then if I started the bike, there would be a RPM thing up here to letting you know what RPMs you're at. You have your RPMs up here. So this is just a way to help you diagnose your bike. Let's say you're wondering if your throttle position sensor is working or has a dead spot. You can twist it slowly and see how, you know, see it come up right here and make sure it's working good. And you can do that with the old tuner too. Got to squeeze in here. There's my YZ250, but here's my YZ450. And I got it hooked up here so I can show you. Just go over here to monitor, and now I have my RPMs, which is at 0 because the bike's not running. I have it set in Fahrenheit, so it's reading 78. The AT is air intake temperature, the WT is water temperature, and the AP, that's atmosphere pressure. That's good to know on this bike because them sensors do go out and they cause all kinds of little weird running issues. And then we got TP. That's the throttle position. Now let me get up in here, I'll show you something. On this bike, I'm going to twist the throttle here. On this bike, it doesn't go to 100%. You see, it goes to 80. That's because this older system, it was actually telling you the throttle blade degrees and not so much the percentage of how much throttle you're getting. So if you look to the right, it will say degrees and 80%. Some read 81. I've seen 82 before, but as long as it reads 0 at 0 throttle and you're getting up to at least 80, I find it'll be good. See, now I'm just cracking the throttle just a little bit, let go, and it goes back to 0, and then full throttle 80. So there you go. And another thing about it is I can go over here to SD, and that's going to show me trouble codes, which there's none, and the runtime, 147 hours in this thing. One thing I feel is important to mention is if you add a high compression piston, higher than stock, to your bike, be real cautious about going plus on the ignition time. And I have seen bikes tuned in where they found even negative on the ignition timing was good, because typically as you go up in your compression ratio, you need less timing advancement, or you'll start stepping into pinging, detonation, things like that. So keep that in mind. When I say typically up to +3 is safe, that's on a stock compression motor. That's with near stock compression ratio. Also, another thing to point out too is, like with the carburetor bikes, you have to jet for different weather, and atmosphere pressure. So if you're at a higher altitude or a lower altitude, or it's hotter or colder outside, you got to change the jetting for that. But with these modern day 4-strokes in the fuel injection system they have a barometric pressure sensor on it that senses the atmosphere pressure. So it's going to know already if you're at higher altitude, and it's going to trim the fuel down for that. Or if you're at low altitude, it's going to add fuel for that. Plus it has the air intake temperature sensor that lets it know the temperature of the air. The only thing it really doesn't know is the humidity. That's just one factor that it's left out. You would actually have to have a mass airflow sensor to get that last little bit of information, but that's beside the point. It knows the atmosphere pressure, and it knows the air temperature, and it also knows the engine's temperature. You don't see the changes it makes when you take it up to a higher altitude. When you look at the map, if you have it on the stock map, it's still going to read 0. It's just there's maps layered in underneath that. There's scaling going on underneath that. So when it senses a lower altitude, it will pull out. It'll scale out on a map it has for the scaling. It'll pull out the fuel and change the timing for the higher altitude. And if you're at lower altitude, it'll do vice versa. Also with the temperature changes and things of the such. The reason I tell you that is because once you find a map that you like for your 4-stroke, you typically don't have to change it. If you go from high altitude or low altitude, it's going to apply the same thing. So if you got this one, let's say all these +2s and 3 right here at sea level, and you go high altitude, well, it's going to scale the mapping for the higher altitude underneath this map that you've done. So all you're doing is build it on top of the map that it's already chose best for the altitude that you're at. Meaning you're not going to have to change the map that you plugged into it when you change altitudes, or let's say you go from winter or summer. Once you put a map in and you like it, you can just leave it be. It's going to make all the corrections it needs to automatically based on the environment that the bike is in. That's pretty much it for this video. My hopes was to bring an understanding of maps and how the cells work, and how to hopefully create your own map to those that just haven't really fooled with this themselves, or they're just getting into it. Thank you, Ian, for letting me use your bike for this video. And if you guys like this kind of stuff and you're not subscribed, please click subscribe. That's really all I do in this channel, is geek out on dirt bike stuff. Catch you guys later.